History is not a river, it is a mirror. We look into the past and see ourselves, trapped in amber. We judge our ancestors for their brutality, their ignorance, their superstitions. We stand atop our technological peaks, confident that we, in our enlightened age, have escaped the darkness. We were wrong. We proved it definitively on the day we found the Tri-Worlds. It wasn't one discovery. It was three in a single breathtaking sweep of the Orion Arm. 3 Class M planets orbiting 3 sister stars, the probes Odyssey, Venture, and Horizon, unmanned emissaries of our boundless curiosity, all reported back within the same week. Their findings were identical and impossible. Not just life, but human life. DNA compatibility 99.98%. A statistical anomaly so profound it shattered our understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. Were we a seed scattered by some ancient unknown hand? Was this some grand lost diaspora? Or was the blueprint of humanity, of bipedal, sentient, tragically flawed consciousness, a cosmic inevitability? The philosophical debate was drowned out by the sociological shock. All 3 planets, which we designated Xylos, Ymir, and Zephyrus, were reflections. They were mirrors of our own 10th century. The first high-resolution images sent shivers through mission control. We saw not just structures. We saw stone castles, grim and formidable, their banners snapping in an alien wind. We saw fields tilled by hand, by creatures we recognized as oxen. We saw crude walled cities, smoke rising from thousands of individual fires. In one harrowing feed from Odyssey, we witnessed what appeared to be a public execution. In another, from Venture, a cavalry charge. We were staring at our own brutal infancy, living and breathing 3 times over. The greatest discovery in human history immediately became our greatest moral crisis. We had found our past, and the question that echoed from every screen, every government hall, every university was, what do we do with it? Back on Earth, the tri-world question fractured global unity. The discovery did not unite us. It revealed the deep ideological fault lines hidden beneath our advanced post-scarcity society. 3 powerful factions emerged, their arguments echoing in the chambers of the Planetary Council for nearly a decade. The first faction was the Guardians. Comprised of scientists, anthropologists, and ethicists, they championed the Prime Directive of non-interference. Their argument was one of terrible virtue. To interact, they claimed, was to contaminate. We were a walking plague of ideas. To give them medicine was to destroy their social structures, which were built around the realities of disease and death. To give them knowledge was to obliterate their culture, their gods, their entire reason for being. The Guardians pointed to our own history, the devastating cultural annihilations that occurred during Earth's colonial eras. When advanced societies met primitive ones, the primitive ones did not just level up, they vanished. They were absorbed, subjugated, or erased. The Guardians argued that these 3 worlds had a sacred, inviolable right to their own destiny, however brutal that destiny might be. We had no right, they said, to play God. Our hubris in even considering it was the very darkness we claimed to have escaped. The second faction was the Interventionists. These were the humanitarians, the doctors, the idealists. They looked at the tri-worlds and saw only suffering. They saw real-time data of plagues, like the red bloom on Xylos, wiping out entire villages. They saw wars fought over scraps of land, ending in massacre. They saw an average life expectancy of 34 years. They saw societies where superstition demanded blood sacrifice, where knowledge was heresy. To the interventionists, inaction was a monstrous act of cruelty. It was the digital equivalent of walking past a dying person on the street. We held the cure for the red bloom. We held the agricultural science to end their famines. We held the simple sociological principles to mediate their wars. We had a moral duty, they argued, to intervene, not as conquerors, but as saviors, to lift these millions from their own dark age, to give them the chance we had. To watch them suffer for the sake of cultural purity was, they claimed, the true act of monstrous hubris. And finally, the third faction, the Pragmatists. These were the economists, the industrialists, the military leaders. They looked at an Earth whose resources, while vast, were finite. Our own post-scarcity society was built on a delicate balance of fusion and renewables, but our interstellar ambitions were costly. And then they looked at Zephyrus, Ymir, and Xylos, 3 new frontiers, untouched, and rich in exotic isotopes and heavy elements vital for faster-than-light travel. The pragmatists argued that sentiment was a luxury, survival was a law. This was not a scientific inquiry, it was an economic imperative. They argued for structured contact, for trade, for utilization. They dismissed the Guardians as naive and the Interventionists as sentimental fools. They proposed to elevate these societies, to offer them technology, controlled technology, in exchange for access to their resources. They would secure humanity's future by leveraging its past. For 10 years, the debate raged. The 3 worlds, oblivious, continued their slow, painful crawl through history. The council was deadlocked. The Guardians would not permit contamination. The Interventionists would not permit suffering. The Pragmatists would not permit waste. The stalemate was broken by a moment of cynical genius. A proposal, allegedly from the Pragmatist bloc, that was so monstrous in its scope, yet so symmetrical, that it gained a terrifying traction. It was called the Tri-World Accord. It was, in effect, a galactic social experiment. The argument was simple, and in its simplicity, seductive. We have 3 philosophies and 3 identical starting points. Why argue in hypotheticals? Let us run the experiment. Let us prove which path is right. A horrified silence fell upon the council, but the logic was insidious. The Guardians, horrified by the other 2 options, agreed, if only to create a control group to prove the virtue of their way and the horror of the others. The Interventionists, believing utterly in the righteousness of their compassion, agreed, eager to show the galaxy the power of benevolence. And the Pragmatists, of course, agreed, for they knew that results were their strongest argument. The accord was drafted as the most complex legal and ethical document in history. The Guardians would take Xylos. They were given a fleet of cloaked skywatch stations. Their directive, observe only. Any contact, any signal, any interference was punishable as a crime against pan-humanity. The Interventionists would take Ymir. They were given a fleet of teacher ships. Their directive, uplift. They were to heal, feed, and educate, but were forbidden from using military force or coercive measures. The Pragmatists would take Zephyrus. They were given a fleet of corporate vessels. Their directive, develop. They were permitted to trade, to build, and to hire labor, bound by Earth's own, often flexible labor laws. 3 fleets launched, 3 destinies were sealed, and humanity began to watch its own reflection in 3 separate mirrors. We will now jump forward 100 years. The results of the grand experiment are in. We check the observation logs for Xylos first, the world of pure non-interference. 100 years later, Xylos is almost unchanged. The observation drones, cloaked in the high atmosphere, transmit images of a world still mired in the 10th, or perhaps the 11th century. The cultural drift is minimal. In year 45 of the experiment, the red bloom plague returned, originating from a fungal crop blight. It was devastating. The Skywatch stations watched. They recorded the genetic structure of the virus. They synthesized a cure in under an hour. They watched the telemetry of the dying. Over 30% of the northern continent's population perished. They watched villages fall silent, and cities burn themselves in a futile attempt at quarantine. The Guardians held the cure, and they did nothing. In year 72, 2 major empires, the Valerians and the Thracian horde, rose and fell. Their wars were fought with trebuchets, crude cavalry, and mass infantry charges. An estimated 4 million people died in the culminating Battle of the Ash Fields. The Guardians watched, their sensors recording every scream, every failed tactic. The average life expectancy on Xylos remains 34 years. Superstition is rampant. Scientific inquiry is punished as heresy by dominant competing faiths. The official report from the Guardian administration is heavy with the burden of their choice. It is a philosophical treatise on cultural authenticity. They argue that Xylos is pure. Its culture, its struggles, its triumphs, they are theirs, bought and paid for in their own blood. They are authentic. We did not taint them with our power. We gave them, the report concludes, the one thing we were never given, the right to their own destiny. Now, we turn to Ymir, the world saved by the Interventionists. 100 years later, Ymir is unrecognizable. The teacher fleets descended on day one, appearing as angels from the sky, their ships like mountains floating above the castles. They cured the red bloom in a single coordinated aerosol dispersal. They stopped the wars, not with violence, but by simply demonstrating their power, vaporizing an uninhabited mountain peak. The chieftains, faced with gods, laid down their swords. They introduced sanitation, fusion power, and advanced agriculture. Famine was eradicated in a decade. The cities are clean, orderly, and identical. The architecture is a bland, prefabricated hybrid of human efficiency and local aesthetics. There is no grime, no chaos, no imperfection. The average life expectancy is 90 years. There is no war. There is no disease. There is also no art, no new music, no dissent, no new philosophies. The people of Ymir are healthy, safe, and live in a state of perpetual grateful childhood. They worship the humans whom they call the benevolent teachers. Their entire lives are structured around learning modules and community wellness. Their original cultures, their languages, their vibrant warring faiths are all but gone. They have been relegated to cultural heritage museums, sterile buildings curated by their saviors, where actors reenact the dark times. The Interventionists' report is triumphant. Billions, it states, who would have died of plague, famine, and war are now alive. They are happy. They are safe. The report asks, is that not the ultimate goal? We guided them past their dark age. We pruned their more dangerous, self-destructive cultural traits. We gave them peace. What is a lost epic poem compared to a saved life? And finally, Zephyrus, the Pragmatists' economic model. 100 years later, Zephyrus is a powerhouse. The Pragmatists landed not with medicine, but with contracts. They bypassed the peasants and went straight to the warring chieftains. They offered them power. Grant us exclusive mining rights to the Cobalt Mountains, their emissaries said, and we will make you kings, not of mud castles, but of steel. The chieftains agreed, signing complex legal documents with a thumbprint. The planet's crust, rich in exotic isotopes vital for faster-than-light travel, was plundered. Massive refineries owned by Earth corporations now scar the landscape. Their smog chokes the sky in a permanent industrial twilight visible from orbit. The native Xylo humans are not slaves. The Accord forbade it. They are employees. They work grueling 18-hour shifts in the factories and mines for wages, credits they use to buy human-made trinkets, processed food, and virtual reality escapes. They have technology, basic firearms for security, communication grids for productivity, but only what is necessary for their labor. Their old castles are gone, replaced by sprawling, polluted shanty towns that huddle in the shadows of the refineries. Earth is booming. The influx of resources from Zephyrus ended our energy crisis and funded a new golden age of interstellar expansion. The average life expectancy on Zephyrus? 42 years. An improvement, but one poisoned by industrial runoff and lung disease. The Pragmatists' report is the shortest. It is mostly charts. It shows Earth's GDP growth at 400%. It shows the efficiency of the resource extraction. It concludes with a single sentence. Progress isn't always pretty, but it is progress. We did not just save them, we made them relevant. The grand experiment was over. The data was collected, the reports were filed. We had presented humanity with 3 choices, and humanity had chosen all 3. On Xylos, we found a civilization left to the mercy of nature and its own inner demons, authentic but brutal. On Ymir, we found a civilization saved from suffering, but robbed of its soul, a planetary pet in a gilded cage. On Zephyrus, we found a civilization ripped from its history and forced into servitude, a planetary engine fueling our ambition, When we began, we thought we were asking, what is the right way to treat them? But after 100 years, the data revealed a different, more chilling truth. The Tri-World Accord was never a test of their development, it was a test of ours. Xylos, Ymir, and Zephyrus had become three mirrors, reflecting back at us the three faces of our own soul. The detached, cold observer, capable of watching suffering without flinching. The suffocating, narcissistic savior who loves humanity but destroys cultures. And the efficient, relentless predator who sees all things as a resource to be consumed. And now, a new variable has entered the equation. A variable we created, resentment. The experiment is contaminating itself. Our long-range sensors, the very ones used to observe, are picking up new signals. On Xylos, the Guardians finally slipped. A Skywatch drone, damaged by a solar flare, malfunctioned and crashed in a populated area. The Xylo humans, now in a nascent 12th century, did not worship it. They dissected it. They reverse-engineered its data core. They now know they were watched. Watched for a century. They have seen the footage. They've seen the data of the Red Bloom cure, synthesized in orbit, while their families died. Their new unifying religion is not one of superstition, but of cold, calculated hatred for the watchers in the sky. They are advancing, unified by a single purpose: vengeance. They are building, not cathedrals, but crude observatories. On Ymir, the children are growing up. They have found the cracks in their gilded cage. A data file containing the original Tri-World Accord was leaked, perhaps intentionally, by a guilt-ridden teacher. They learned that their salvation was not an act of pure compassion. It was an experiment. They are beginning to see their benevolent teachers not as saviors, but as galactic scientists, and them as the subjects. A quiet, terrifying resistance is spreading using the very communication technology we gave them. They smile at their jailers, attend their learning modules, and plot. And on Zephyrus, the employees are unionizing. They have learned our systems. They have learned our economics. They have learned our tactics. They have learned that their labor is their power. They are now using our own technology to organize a planet-wide violent rebellion fueled by a century of exploitation. They're not just striking, they're sabotaging the refineries. They're learning to fight. They don't just want better wages. They want the refineries. They want the ships. They want us gone. The experiment is over, but the consequences are just beginning. When you look into those three mirrors, which reflection is yours? The detached guardian, the suffocating savior, or the relentless pragmatist? There was no right answer, only a different consequence. Which path would you have chosen? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy stories that explore the hard questions of humanity's future, please consider subscribing for more what-if scenarios.